Hi everyone, today we will be presenting on our differentiable particle filter extension, which uses early sensor fusion for visual odometry. So the original paper that we reproduced and then subsequently extended is the differentiable particle filter, which uses end-to-end learning and algorithmic priors. And the authors of this paper can be seen on this slide. And presenting the presentation today on our extension is myself, Clayton.
And Nick.
So for the contributions and value of our extension, our proposition is basically to implement a multimodal measurement update. In particular, we are fusing the original camera difference images that are used as an observation with a secondary observation provided from an IMU, which provides heading in addition to angular velocities and angular accelerations. And the value added with this proposition is basically we are attempting to attenuate the odometry error that is accumulated due to just integration of heading velocity over time. And in the presentation slides, we basically highlight how we implement this multimodal filter, how we are fusing the different readings and using this IMU reading to improve the results of the kitty visual odometry experiment. So this slide highlights the approach of the original particle filter, which uses an end-to-end learnable prediction step and measurement update model to calculate the belief at each state. And one key thing for this, for efficient end-to-end learning of this model, is that we need to be able to backpropagate the gradient throughout the entire algorithm, as seen in blue in the figure on this slide. And one interesting note about the original DPF is that it rediscovers what we found through trial and error. When I say we, the humans found through trial and error, and that is that overestimating uncertainty in all steps of the filter improves performance. So this diagram is basically a high-level representation of how the differentiable filter functions. We have a prediction step that takes an action and processes that action with the action sampler, which is learned to produce noisy actions. These noisy actions are then passed into the learned or deterministic dynamics model, which propagates the particle poses according to the noisy actions produced by the action sampler. Once these particles have been propagated in the prediction step, we move over to the measurement update step, in which an observation in the form of a camera image and difference image is taken in. And this is encoded by an observation encoder. And this encoded image is passed into a likelihood estimator, and it is used to set the weights of each propagated particle. Additionally, the encoded image is passed into a particle proposer to insert new hypotheses into our sample. And this particle proposer is just used at the first few initial steps of the filter. So to learn this DPF, the authors use sequences of ground truth observations, actions, and states for training. Once they have collected all of this training data, they essentially use the untrained model to produce the predicted particles. The predicted particles may be seen as the gray spheres in the figure, with the darkness indicating their weight. And then from this line, you are able to, from these particles, you're able to convert to a Gaussian mixture, which is the blue line. And then from this blue line, we can determine the belief at the true state, which can be seen as the orange bar. And to train the model to optimize for this belief at the true state, we maximize the belief using maximum likelihood estimation. So we quickly want to present the results of the kitty visual odometry experiment conducted in the original DPF paper. As you can see, the input is images and difference images seen in the figure on the left. And on the right, you can see the results of the kitty visual odometry experiment using the unimodal particle filter. And in particular, you see that there is a pretty large amount of odometry error when the camera yaw rate is high. And we just wanted to quickly highlight some numerical results for this visual odometry test in the original paper. They compare it to the backpropagation Kalman filter algorithm, which is basically should be perfectly suited for the task of tracking a unimodal belief from a known initial condition. And even with that, we see that the individually and end-to-end learned particle filter outperforms the VKF in different test trajectory lengths and also in translational and rotational error.
So our extension to this particle filter method is to incorporate what is known as sensor fusion. There are a few different types of sensor fusion. One form of sensor fusion is called late sensor fusion. That's where we have two independent measurement models, each performing a particle reweighting based on two independent observations. And then we have early sensor fusion, which is what we pursue in this paper. Early sensor fusion involves incorporating a second observation into the observational encoding layer seen in the bottom left of the image. We then sort of get this like stacked encoding data tensor, and then we pass it through a fusion layer, which just allows the model to further correct for different scaling factors or different intricacies of the two different data types. In this example, we use a camera observation in the form of a difference image, as well as an IMU observation in form of a gyroscopic rate measurement. However, observations can come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and so this fusion layer melds the two in an optimal way before being passed to the measurement model. That fusion technique is as well learned during the end-to-end training process. In this specific example, we are sampling actions off of the accelerometer. We're then passing it through a learned motion model and then predicting updates to velocity states. Looking at the whole thing sort of expanded a little bit further, as you can see in the bottom left, we combine two observational encodings from the IMU as well as the camera. We then pass it through our fusion layer and then our observation likelihood estimator to do particle reweightings on just the velocities in the forward direction as well as the angular velocity about the center of the car in the key data set. On the right-hand side, you see how we do our predictions and dynamics. We have as I said, we have a learned dynamics model that maps accelerometer readings to velocity estimates. We add noise to those estimates to the action sampler to reduce mode collapse. And then we use a deterministic physics model, which essentially just integrates the predicted velocities over time for our various particles to get position estimates. We then apply this whole procedure to the kitty data set in a way that's similar to the original DPF paper and sort of categorize different results. Looking more at the dynamics model, on the right-hand side, you see the original implementation in the DPF paper, and on the left-hand side, you see our implementation. In the original DPF paper, they acquire actions produced directly from the visual odometry in the form of the outputs from the particle proposer. In our implementation, we accept accelerations and angular accelerations from the onboard accelerometer of the kitty vehicle. The original implementation passes these accelerations or actions through an action sampler, which adds noise to each action. In our specific example, we apply a learned dynamics model to create velocity estimates, but do not directly apply noise before to the acceleration measurements. We actually apply noise afterwards to the predicted velocities from those accelerations, which is sort of a subtle difference. On the original implementation, the dynamics model propagates the noisy actions through to get predicted poses. And in our implementation, we use our noisy velocity estimates into a deterministic physics model, which is effectively integrating linear and angular velocities into deterministic position and orientation values. Looking more at the measurement update between the original paper and our implementation, we see that the original paper only accepts a single observation in the form of a camera difference image, whereas we accept both the camera difference image as well as an IMU observation. That IMU observation is in the form of a rate gyroscope measurement. That the singular difference image in the original differentiable particle filter is passed through an observational encoder, whereas we pass both the camera observation as well as the IMU observation into an observational encoder, concatenate the outputs of those two encoders, and then pass it through a fusion layer. In the original implementation, they take the output of the observational encoder and pass it directly to an observation likelihood estimator. And in ours, you can see that we take the output of the fusion layer and then pass that to the observation likelihood estimator. This enables the fusion to make further, the fusion layers, excuse me, to make further corrections on the relationships between the two observations. And this is particularly useful in the case where one observation has many more dimensions, such as an image, versus the IMU, which has only 2 dimensions. This observation likelihood estimator then performs a reweighting of the current particles before generating our final belief for this iteration of the particle filter. Furthermore, the original implementation uses a particle proposer to construct new particles that are not currently of the set. We don't do this and instead use a richer dynamics model, which you saw on the previous slide, in order to get sufficient expansion of particles throughout the state space. Furthermore, as I said in the previous slide, we use the reweighting from the observation likelihood estimator to construct a belief. This belief is the distribution of particles with their updated states across the state space. We then calculate the mean and variance of these particles to get a posterior pose estimate.
For the results for our extension, on the left, you can see the differential particle filter produced from the Kitty visual results from the previous paper. And then for our re-implementation, where we have no fusion from the Kitty visual odometer results, you can see in the middle. And then when we actually did the early sensor fusion, where we both fused the IMU measurements and the camera data, you see all the way on the right. That's a visual of our results on the right. So when you go into the actual numbers, we see that we trained it on different numbers of trajectories. We either trained it on one trajectory and then one, and then we tested on another, and then so on and so forth for 1, 2, and 3 trajectories. As you see with our differential particle filter without the fusion, we was able to achieve the best model we was able to achieve was with 2 training trajectories. As you see there, it was able to get a translational error of 0.1369, and then with a rotational error of 0.0350. But with the sensor fusion, you see on the second line, we was able to get really, really good results, with our best model being from training 3 training trajectories, which was with a translational error of 0.0165 and rotational error of 0.0109. Then, just to conclude what we've seen so far, basically we improved on the original differential particle filter by fusing multiple sensors. Then we was able to greatly improve odometry results, as we've seen earlier, by 88% between no fusion and with fusion. And lastly, as you see in our images, we was able to get great inference results based on few training trajectories, i.e. that means, we have very great generalization between different trajectories. Last and not least, the limitations of this work that we did was there were differences in training procedures from our training and the original paper. We didn't run the same experiment, so we can't compare the previous results. And to be specific, we didn't train on sub-trajectories based on length. We trained on the entire trajectory, whereas the original paper trained only on subsections of 100 meters, 200 meters, 400 meters, and 800 meters. Also, what we could do for next directions for this work is we can do additional work with sensor fusion. We could train on tasks outside of urban environments, urban driving environments, which we've seen all the other past works do. We can also add redundant sensors like multiple cameras, which you see on self-driving cars. And also we can start testing other methods, such as late fusion methods.